I actually started recording this. Thank you for jumping in, guys. I really appreciate. Okay. I will very quickly summarize everything. Okay, guys, so because the recording wasn't going on in the first 10 minutes, I'm just going to quickly summarize what I said in the first page. It's not something that is very difficult to understand when you read on your own. That we just said that children are gaining access in high, middle, and even low income countries, gaining more access to technology. And that creates a lot of worries about using the screen time and internet addiction. What if they are communicating with strangers online? These are very common popular worries that parents have right now. But also, there is something which is challenging for parents, especially, is that they already have a lot of things to do in terms of parenting. And now they try to supervise and also understand the use of these technologically complex services. And that creates a lot of limitation for parenting. And whatever is normally expected of parents, we should always remember that there's a limit of what they can do. And we said that on top of their duties of teaching children about values in life, social norms, accepted behavior, about everything basically, now they have this duty of balancing child's digital technology use and protecting their children in online world as well. Generally, we say parents are the first people who are responsible for keeping children safe. They are also expected to enable to their child to study, to help in the family, to keep healthy, but practical things in daily life like crossing the road, making good judgments about people, places, understanding judgment about places, judgment about information, all these developmental areas. We expect parents to support all these developmental areas: social development, cognitive development, emotional development, physical development. You see, they are all about developmental areas, and also learning about their own society, like crossing the road. What shall I do when I talk with people? Everything is on the shoulders of parents, which is quite a lot, if you ask me, quite a lot. And that's why digital technology is creating an extra burden. And that's why most of the time they feel like they are failing. And they feel like guilty when they let the child to use the iPad freely. If any of you who are a parent, I know one or two of you are parents, please don't feel guilty, because at least some researchers are wise enough to appreciate how hard it is. Okay, one thing that really works for parents, studies found that to differentiate and also to balance offline and online parenting, there is something that parents consistently need to do, which is positive parenting. Positive parenting is described as stimulation and affection, clear and focused praise, supporting and increasing autonomy, encouraging healthy habits, goal settings, establishing firm roles and consequences, which is basically ideal parenting. If you look at this chart as well, you can see the details about positive parenting, which describes a set of parental behaviors that fosters a child's capacity to love, trust, explore, and learn. Please don't be confused about this parenting with the other types of parenting that we covered, and with the lecture from Zoe, I think that you covered about the other types of parenting, like authoritarian parenting. These are more scientific terms we use to understand in more research sense. But in general, in the public sense, in society, this term is much more commonly used. This is something different. This is not an extra category on top of authoritarian, authoritative, permissive parenting. Just don't mix them up. This is something else. A different kind of pedagogy has created this. So it's basically a very general name given to the positive parental behaviors that we want to see more often. It's not like we say, okay, you're doing positive parenting to one parent and then you're doing negative parenting to one parent. No, it's more like, this is more like the ideal set of parental behaviors all get together and then we call them positive parenting. The more you try to do these, the more you approach a helpful kind of parenting. That's how we can see them, such as understanding child's point of view, understanding the child's world and being more sensitive to the children, like it's being attentive to when they cry, when they want something. Also recognizing that parenting can sometimes be stressful and don't feel guilty or don't feel the need to be perfect all the time. It is a part of child rearing. Children also need to experience parents' imperfect world as well. If everything is perfect, how do they learn about life? They can't. Parents can do only whatever they can, and the rest is up to the child to compensate in life. And recognize and celebrate the child's strengths, abilities, capacity to learn and develop, things like that. So you can engage with it in your own time. This guide is here for you to understand. But these are all relating to all developmental areas. That's all I can say. Some of them are understanding about emotional development of the child and supporting emotional development, whereas some are more related to cognitive development, more related to social development. Okay, it's quite rich in a sense. So, importance of positive behavior, positive parenting for child development has already been established, and in different areas of development, as well as educational outcomes. The more positive parenting, the better educational outcomes children have displayed. And that also improve their social communication.
Can you share your screen again, please?
Say it again, Laura.
Can you share your screen again, please?
This is a very bad day for me, I think.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think the problem is, guys, I realize when I do the full screen, I'm missing your chat. You already warned me, and I just see now. Okay, how about this? If I share my screen that size, sorry about this. I don't know what's happening to me today. I guess the lockdown life is not easy. If I share my screen like this, would it be enough for you to see it so that I'm able to see your chat as well?
Yeah. For me, anyway. It's okay.
Are the others also okay? Okay. Thank you, guys. Apologies. But I think what I explained is very easy to understand. So I'm kind of positive that you will be able to catch up when you look at these slides. So I just mentioned about positive parenting. What do we say positive parenting? And I haven't even gone into the details. I mentioned about the fact that positive parenting is very important for different areas of development, just so you can see here. Just going to continue from that. It's funny, when I summarize it, I also say, I can say these things only in 2 sentences, why I talk so much. So around age 10, this becomes more challenging, which is not very related to us because we are only dealing with early childhood. But just to let you know, around age 10 and end of early childhood period, positive parenting becomes more difficult because children are seeking more autonomy and independence, and the parenting styles need to adapt to that. One thing they found about this is positive parenting has been helpful for online behavior as well. So if we want to balance online and offline parenting, one thing we can do is to be consistent for the online behavior. So if you are doing positive parenting, which means you're trying to understand your child, you're trying to connect with the child rather than giving rules and regulations without explaining so much, if you are sensitive to the needs of the child, but then if you go to the online parenting, which is trying to regulate child's digital technology use, and then also all of a sudden, if you become very authoritarian, and then you're like, no, you have only half an hour, that's it. Why? Because I said so. That's kind of parenting. Could be very conflicting and confusing for the child. So whatever we do in the name of positive parenting, in the offline world, which is the world that we don't have the digital technology in, we need to keep it consistent for the digital technology as well. So research shows that this is a good way to start. Let's have a look at the global perspective now. Parenting in digital age is not exactly the same in every part of the world. So there are some interesting differences in global north and global south. And remember, global north is mostly Europe and Western countries like US, Canada. So when we say global north, we are mostly talking about developing countries as well. So it's basically, if you can look at the map, you will see which are global north, the blue ones, and global south is the orange ones. And you can see, if you know a little bit geography, if you don't, you can just look at from Google and see, oh, which was this country, which was this country. You can see the differences. If you ever been to these countries, it will also help you. A recent survey showed that with lots of different people, it's a very quite powerful sample size, 6,400, European parents of children aged 6 to 14, this is slightly exceeding early childhood, but nevertheless quite important, found that parents to be fairly concerned about children's online experiences. So this is what's happening in high income, the global north countries. Their concerns were especially focusing on exposure to violent content and images of being bullied online, data tracking, digital identity theft, and advertisements of unhealthy lifestyles. Everything that we experience today in advertisements, whatever we see on online, there are lots of violence. There's a lot of issues with the content we view, and there's a lot of digital concerns we have right now. You know, I think nowadays it's a very interesting time. People are considering leaving Facebook for good because of the digital identity, digital data tracking issues. You know, recently WhatsApp has received a lot of criticism, and people started downloading other apps like Telegram, Signal, because of data privacy issues right now. And parents are concerned about this for their children as well, because in the case of children, they don't even know these things yet. They are much more naive and innocent and more easy to be manipulated. There are ways that children are monitored, which we call, so the way parents manage their child's internet technology use life is called mediation, which means the child is not actually free, but the parent is mediating, is, can I say, just like being involved. So the parent being involved. Mediation is like a fancy term that we use, but it's meaning how parents are involved in this. What do they actually do? There are two main styles of parental mediation. The first is restrictive mediation, which means parents restrict or ban very strictly or insist on supervising for a long list of online activities. So it doesn't mean they always restrict. Sometimes they can allow the child to use things, but they would prefer to supervise majority of whatever they do and whatever tool they use and whatever activity they do. They are quite controlling in a way. If you look at enabling mediation, which is the opposite of restrictive mediation, in this one, parents undertake active strategies such as talking to a child about what they do online or encouraging their activities, as well as giving safety advice. Also, using activities that might seem restrictive, use of technical controls, parenting monitoring, but they might be using these activities that look restrictive, but they are better interpreting them. They are better at applying them, and they use these things more for the name of creating a safe framework, not for being controlling parents. And so that they actually encourage positive uses of the internet. And they talk about online activities. They encourage using them, but they also give safety advice as well. Studies found that more enabling mediation by parents was positively associated with children's experience of online opportunities. So there is quite a lot of benefits in being enabling. Enabling doesn't mean you let the child do whatever they want. It's more in a positive approach. Enabling means you will not be aiming to restrict the child. Your aim is not restricting or controlling. Your aim is making sure the child is getting the digital experience in a healthy way, in a safe way, and in a balanced way. Enabling doesn't also mean you let the child use 10 hours of iPad every day. More restrictive mediation was associated with fewer online risks by children, but also they enjoyed fewer opportunities. So what's happening is there is a bit of challenge between enabling mediation and restrictive mediation. Enabling mediation is because it's more relaxed. Obviously, it creates more online risks for children because the parents are a bit more cool with letting the child use YouTube 1 hour on their own, something like this. Whereas in restrictive mediation, because they don't do it, they can constantly monitor the child comes across less online risks. So when you use enabling mediation, children enjoy the experience more, learn more, but there's more chance of online risks. When you do restrictive mediation, children do not enjoy that much opportunities compared to the children who had enabling parents, but they come across fewer online risks. So what is the balance here? How do we find the balance? Risks, not always meaning there is harm. We need to really actually look, what is the major risk? And what is the actual harm? I think this is a very interesting subject because I feel like this risk analysis, proportional risk analysis, is something that is highly missing even today. Like being risk averse, I see like the experience we go through now, there's restrictions that we experience, that we have been at home, locked in our homes almost like a year. It's, I think, very related to this subject that society is acting in a very risk averse way. Whereas if you look at the data and if you see the risks and actually see, okay, maybe I'm not in such a high risk group, and actually I can live my life a bit more easier than they told me. If we actually think about these things, this is the same with parental mediation. There's a lot of worry. There's a lot of talk about, oh my God, you let your child use this alone? What are the actual risks? Let's really actually look at them and see and observe and try to understand rather than interpreting worries and fears. So do they actually get harmed? Look at the statistics. They don't actually get major harms that often. Depends on, of course, how you set the agenda for them. Enabling mediation is more the way to go forward because it helps the child also to build resilience. If there's a small amount of risk, that's also something that child needs to learn as well, to how to cope with it, to how to find a strategy. We can always talk about these things with child, but then you need to trust the child to come across some ways of protecting themselves as well, some way of judging the information they see online. And it's something that you can already have to teach them, not for surviving online digital life, also for surviving life. We don't need to teach child, we don't need to be always there for the child to judge the risk. We need to teach the children to judge the risk by themselves. Basically, what we are talking about here is how can we teach the child to safeguard themselves. Further research with some surveys, questionnaires done with parents in Europe again, in Northern, we are still talking about Northern Globe, show that parents prefer a risk-averse, restrictive strategy for, especially for in less skilled children, presumably adopting their child's ability to cope with the risk if they encounter it. This is very sad, isn't it? If they feel like their children are not as competent in understanding about any risk, not very competent in making their own judgments, solving problems in the online world, if they have lack of belief in their children, they are becoming more restrictive. I think this is very much the case with any kind of parenting in the offline world as well. The less they trust their child, the more controlling and restricting and authoritative they become, which is very unhealthy because it creates a vicious cycle. If child comes to the world with, we talked about these things, right? With the temperament difference of not being, sometimes children have less of skills in one area compared to other areas, right? If a child, let's say, comes to the world with maybe some, how can I say, some more need to develop, improve social skills. And maybe they are not very great at understanding other people's intentions. Does that mean we will always be there to protect them? Or does that mean we should do something to help them to understand these skills, improve these skills? So it's been found that if the parents don't really rely on their children's abilities, they are more restrictive. But if they feel like their children are more competent, they can sort their lives, they can sort their use of online technology fine, they then become more encouraging. Oh, okay, you go on, I trust you. That's quite unfair for the children, actually. This is something to be aware of. Okay, a famous research, EU Kids Online 2020, it's still going on, I believe. It shows survey results from 19 countries in the European Union. And so they show some other problems with parenting and family life in digital age. What they found is children who are more vulnerable to risk of harm offline also tend to be more vulnerable online. This is the same thing I mentioned before. If your child is more vulnerable and less skilled in protecting themselves and understanding the risk in a certain situation, you will find that this behavior will be exactly the same in online world as well. So they will find it difficult to, okay, let's say that there is a stranger talking to them online. That's a very extreme example, by the way, it doesn't happen every day. They will find it difficult to judge the motives of that stranger. They will find it difficult to perhaps not to believe, to be careful, maybe, depends on the child, of course, but they might be more vulnerable. Another thing they found in that research is 1 in 8 parents do not provide supportive or safety mediation. So mediation is mostly skewed into this restrictive side rather than the enabling, supportive side. So parents being involved in child's digital offline activities is actually not very supportive. It's less understanding. It's not very also targeted around creating safety. It's more about controlling. And around half of the parents whose child has encountered an online risk is unaware of this. So this is a problem when you become more too enabling. Too enabling means you really forget about the realities of our world, which we don't want as well from the parents. Being relaxed and enabling and encouraging doesn't mean you are ignoring that actually it's not very safe out there. So technology will continue to advance. There's nothing we can do to stop that. I wish there was. Sometimes I'm thinking it's way too much. And continuous technological innovations challenging parental competence and the confidence level of the parents, because they are kind of very challenged. There's a dilemma. They want their children to get the best outcome most of the time in life. They want children to catch up with these innovations and technologies because they don't want them to lag behind. Of course, no parent would like to. It's a bit similar to past. If you were not able to provide children a toy, every child is playing with toys. Why I am missing a toy? The children would feel like they're missing in life. It's the same for technological devices today. So parents, on the one hand, they try to minimize and control screen time, but on the other hand, they try to keep up with the latest technology by not letting their child down. They don't want to feel like they are, how can I say, disadvantaging their children by not keeping up with buying these technologies or using these technologies. Let's have a quick look at what's happening in low and mid-income countries as well. When we talk about global South countries, almost 4 billion in those countries don't have internet connection. Obviously, this is something that is coming from older research. Probably this is quite less right now. But I have to say there's still huge population in the world who's not really in using digital technologies. But that doesn't mean it's the same with everyone in these populations. So what they found is young people who are below the age of 25 are 3 times more likely than the general population in global South to be using the internet. So that makes them pioneers, You remember our education pioneers? Pioneer means someone who is the leader of that movement or like founder of one information. So they are more like pioneers in their society in using internet. But that means if they become pioneers from very young age, they like support from knowledgeable adults. They like supervision because adults don't know. So they are left alone using this on their own. That's the problem. So do you see the difference between the global South and the North? Global North is dealing with parenting related issues. How can we enable the child, or are we restricting the child, or are we creating enough safety? In the global South, the issue is there are not many parents who are even aware of the digital technologies, who are even using or capable of giving any supervision. It's quite distinct picture. Why is this case though? Why is this the case? In global South countries, we experience a lot of migration, wars, illnesses, parental death is high, more frequent, poverty is more frequent, and these things affect the family's functioning as well as parents or caregivers, because they are most of the time left without not many resources, not many chance to reach digital technologies or time to help their children because their lives are difficult. In developing countries, people really struggle with living the life. I'm not saying all of them, by the way. Please don't put every country in this box. It's just statistically speaking, when I compare with the Western world, because Western world is composed of economically powerful countries, right? They are the overrulers of the world. You like it or not, this is a fact. Because they have more power and more money, obviously that reflects on the daily life as well. But whereas if you go to Syria right now, it's a country that is still receiving attacks even today. The war is still going on in Syria. It doesn't stop. Apparently the change in the American presidencies also hasn't stopped, because I'm following these news, and there's still war going on in Syria, and also now there's something going on in Iraq as well, which is quite concerning for me, because can you imagine the lives of children living in these countries, always experiencing war? How can you expect healthy parenting in those situations? Just have a look at what we are experiencing now. Our worlds are shaked up in the Europe because of the pandemic, right? Everybody's at home, everybody's fearful, parents are not able to do their jobs anymore properly because they also need to home educate their children. It's a mess, it's a chaos. And do you think parenting is going ideal in this age? Probably not. And now imagine children growing up in a country which is experiencing attacks, war attacks all the time. This is going to be 100 times more challenging for them, 10 times more challenging than what we are experiencing now. So that creates not just parental issues, of course, it creates digital problems, digital divides. So parents don't even have a chance to catch up on these technologies because probably they lack these things in their life, and how can they bring it to their child's life? And the digital divide between the children and other generations is quite strong in these countries. It is very hard to expect in those countries a grandparent who is 70-year-old, for instance, will be able to monitor his or her child's internet use, because in those countries, it's very often the case that grandparents are involved in childcare. We know that it is the case in our countries as well, but with Global South, grandparents' role in childcare is much more common. But the grandparents won't be able to give the safety and supervision the child needs, because they don't even know how to use these technologies. They don't know how to monitor. They have no understanding. I mean, most of the time, no understanding. So they can't really support them with the development of digital skills. So these are the problems that we have in low and mid-level income countries in Global South. And another problem is, which is quite striking if you ask me, parental mediation techniques in these countries sometimes are reflecting the cultural values. And the cultural values in those countries, not all of them, of course, sometimes tend to be very restricting. And then they create restricting parenting even more, restricting mediation even more. And what happens is children learn to hide what they do online, which is quite dangerous if you ask me, because if there's a harm, there's a risk, they feel like they can't talk with their parent because they feel guilty. And then that means they will have to experience whatever risk, and maybe they will be harmed from that. For instance, a study in 2013 found that, it's a study that is done in Bahrain, in Iraq, the cultural gender perspective, there's in Middle East countries, and many of them, there's a very strong gender segregation in the society. The gender segregation is experienced more, pressures of the gender experienced more by girls in these countries. So for instance, parents expected girls to use the digital media more carefully than boys. And then they said, okay, if you talk with other boys online, that's not acceptable in our culture. And if you talk with other boys, if I see that you talk with other boys, I will be punishing you. I will be doing this, or you will not be having this, whatever punishment. It's very harsh parenting. And it happens. I'm not saying it happens in every country in the global south, but there's a trend. And that trend actually created a lot of problems with the way these children in these countries use digital technologies as well. So this is another issue going on in these countries. For instance, another study in South Africa, they ask parents, if you do worry about your children experiencing bullying, they do 40% said they worry for children being bullied, but they said that it's not really like it's a higher concern as bullying on offline world. So when they talked with children about their experiences of bullying online, so parents say, okay, we worry about their children. We worry about our children to be bullied. And they ask children, are you bullied online? And they said, yes, we have experienced some sort of bullying online. But parents didn't really consider online bullying as a sort of concern yet. You see, this is also related to I think it's mostly because the digital technology is not very common in their lives yet. So they don't really understand the risks that come with it. They don't really take it seriously that much, if I put it in a very simple word. As they explained, this is due to lack of parental knowledge on both digital technologies as well as their children's life. So they really have lack of knowledge on what's going on in a child's world. And they also have lack of knowledge in what's happening in online world. It's a very disconnected parenting. Again, but I'm not blaming them because the society life in those places are difficult. When you are more concerned about paying the bills, your parenting is going to be impacted. We talked about this before, how poverty is impacting family environment. You know these things already. So there is a sway from total restriction and no access to advice. In South Africa, they found that in countries in global South, they found that either it's total restriction, no access to a device because of being unable to provide the device due to economic conditions, maybe. From that, or to little guidance or how to use internet safely. So it's really not looking great. Okay, that I've given a very negative picture, but it's actually not that negative. We only need to encourage, because this is very new, that's why I think it's negative. And when something is new, when there's a change, start of a change is always more difficult. So we are still in the beginning of using digital technologies, and we are still in the beginning of understanding how can we include them in a child's life. And that's why parents struggle. There's a lot of tension between protecting the child versus giving a child the freedom to explore, learn, and grow. The way to go forward is encourage the parents to know more about their children's life, as well as their online activities. and apply a consistent type of parenting between the online and offline activities, which is more vague or to positive parenting, which is including more aspects of positive parenting. We need to be aware of our mediation. Are we doing enabling mediation? Are we doing restrictive mediation? Can we find a balance between these things and sway more into enabling mediation with a bit more concern to online risks? We need to be more aware of safeguarding in the digital age. Also, parents, they don't need to catch up with every single technology out there, but more what they need to catch up with. How can I provide my child the skills to be careful, the skills to judge an information on their own, the skills to take a risk and protect themselves? That doesn't mean they need to know about every technology, okay? But nevertheless, both children and the adults need more support about digital literacy and awareness of risks. Awareness of digital risks is something that should come from governments and policies, because it's very obvious now there's huge amount of risks for children right now. Okay, this is all I wanted to share today.